Good evening and welcome to this November 8th, 2021 meeting of the Lake Bluff Village Board of Trustees for the Committee of the Whole meeting. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Inkeman.
Here.
Trustee Brienne.
Here.
Trustee Fisher. Trustee Markey.
Here.
Trustee Reppin.
Here.
Trustee Ryder.
Thank you. First is our non-agenda items and visitor for public comments. The Committee of the Whole allocates 15 minutes during this item for those individuals who would like the opportunity to address the Committee of the Whole on any matter not listed on the agenda. Each person addressing the Committee of the Whole is asked to limit their comments to a maximum of 3 minutes. Please. Thank you. Could you please state your name and your address?
My name is Stephanie Bjork, and my husband and I own the home at 414 East Prospect. I'm here to request a status update on the double power pole situation that exists down Prospect Avenue. And I spoke before the board in the past, and I have communicated with Drew separately prior to the installation when the small wireless device issue was before the board. And the discussion particularly came up that evening that there would be, as is expected, a line sharing agreement. And we don't have that. So right now we've got a very unattractive situation with 2 power pole lines. And it looks like no intent to move the lines over off of the old, what I'm told by the AT&T people are their poles, which they did not agree to the new poles that were put in. So there was no agreement in place ahead of time, I'm told by the workers. So we're looking at a very unattractive situation in the most historic part of town. And there's particular regulations that I spoke to the board about in historic districts. 5G is handled differently in historic districts than it is. And we had been under much discussion with the village in the past to place Prospect and that area in a historic district for protection purposes. So I'd like to once again, given the very large power pole line over there generating some of this infrastructure, I would like to offer to any of the board members who would like to see a very difficult to come by copy of the health risks from exposure to low-level ionizing radiation, which is the basis of the European studies for the countries that refuse to have 5G based on health risks. And also today, an article appeared that the FAA has delayed AT&T and Verizon's rollout of 5G for another month or 2 while they do more assessments because it's interfering with the airplane. And that's specifically, interference with radio communications is specifically one of the things that's not to be done in the rollout. So there's clearly issues that exist to this day. I was told, because we have a difficult situation with Comcast problems, that the village of Lake Bluff is the holder of that Comcast license as well. So I think there's multiple issues here that need to be discussed, and I would just appreciate if the board would attend to that at some point. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, just 2 things really quickly. Like Mrs. Bjork, the village is interested in getting those redundant poles taken down, and we've been poking and prodding ComEd to get that down. That regulation governing that is through the Illinois Commerce Commission, not the village. We don't have any control over that, but we can poke, and we've been doing that. And I actually, as recently as last Thursday, had asked our community affairs rep to give me an update on when we can see those poles coming down. She's still chasing AT&T to get those down as well. So we're actively trying to work with our community affairs rep to try to get that done. But that just another point to clarify that those power poles there were to that existing infrastructure was placed there by ComEd to directly try to reduce the number of outages that occur on that line due to the number of trees on that line. And there was constant losses of power through that area of East Prospect, another, that same circuit. So that was the reason why they put in that more, I'll call it stronger infrastructure there. If you notice, the wiring is really tight, almost jacketed together, and it sits at a much higher level. And, but yeah, what remains is the redundant poles that were there prior to getting replaced. So I think the good news with that is the village worked with ComEd when that work went in to keep the trees. They wanted to remove 13 trees as part of that work. We said no. And then also, there's actually, at the end of the day, there should be one fewer pole on that line than there was to begin with. So that's what our goals are when we come in with those, working with utility providers like ComEd, is to reduce visible infrastructure and save nature when you can. So that's how we approached it. But I guess the final thing I would say is that none of that has to do with 5G infrastructure. There isn't any of that in the village yet. But just to clarify that. But if I can get it, I'm happy to give another update to this board 2 weeks when we meet again, and hopefully it's a good one that here's their plan to take them down, so.
And Drew, can you just confirm, because I've seen that down on Moffett, I think, John, over by you, there's double poles, or at least by Rose. The smaller poles no longer being used, is that?
What happens is after the ComEd moves their power lines, what takes so long is the communication companies, AT&T, Comcast, and all those, they have a period of time when they have are allowed to transfer their lines over to the new poles. And so what happens is you'll notice they're chopped off at the top. So when ComEd moves their infrastructure, they'll cut the pole off at the top and just leave the communications line, and then it becomes the communications company's issue to relocate the lines and then take the poles out.
Well, our job is to advocate for our residents, so it'd be great to get an update.
Yep.
Please.
To clarify, the existing old poles were AT&T poles. The other utilities were line sharing on their infrastructure. The second pole, which is the cut in half old pole now, still carries the AT&T cables because they refused, because apparently they were not a part of the understanding to put in the new poles. So I am told by the supervisors for AT&T that they did not enter into any type of an agreement to move their lines over, and they have no plans to do so. So that's why I raised the issue this evening, because obviously there was much commotion carrying on, but the old poles are AT&T poles, and the lines that are on them now, existing, currently on them, that's why there's double poles up, or they would have been taken down at the time. So the new poles were put up and the infrastructure was put in. To your point about the trees, I respect that. I raised the issue that 5G requires line of sight, and so that does require far more clearing of trees. We've lost the canopy that was going down Prospect as it is, but a part of the reason for that is that AT&T aggressively over the last 2 years trimmed their lines to the low level. And then when the second pole went up, they had to aggressively trim to the high level. So we have now competing trimming, which has taken out far more than if a decision had been made one way or the other earlier in the beginning. So to clarify that point, much tree work has been done by both companies at 2 different levels, which has now left us with a neither situation. So you can see if you look down Prospect, what used to be a canopy of trees very similar to Center is no longer there, which is why the National Register does not allow 5G and makes specific arrangements for historic districts to be protected because it alters the appearance to have to put it in. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. Do we have another public comment? And do we have anybody online willing to do so?
No, sir.
Thank you. Next is our general business. The committee of the whole will entertain requests from anyone present to modify the order of business to be conducted, and I understand that there are no such requests. Our first item is next, the consideration of the minutes from the July 12, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any changes? Thank you. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Inkman?
Aye.
Trustee Briand?
Aye.
Trustee Markey?
Aye.
Trustee Rappin?
Aye.
Thank you. Next, item 4B is a presentation by Infrastructure Management Services regarding their evaluation of village streets. Thank you. We have 2 items on the menu tonight for this meeting, and I understand that your presentation will be about 20 minutes, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Sadaf Kasravifer. I'm with IMS Infrastructure Management Services. I'm a pavement engineer, and today I want to talk about the state of streets in village of Lake Bluff. This study was funded by CMAP, Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning. And CMAP had a few goals with this project. First and foremost, to promote and support asset management at the local level. Second, to implement this program called PAVER. It's a pavement management program, so we implemented this program for the village. And the third goal was to perform a comprehensive, objective, repeatable pavement condition survey on the entire network of the village, and then use that data to evaluate the impact of the village's existing funding level on future pavement conditions in the next 5 years, and also to determine funding levels required to maintain current pavement conditions, to increase the overall pavement conditions to a certain level, and to also completely eliminate all the village's backlog in maintenance and rehabilitation, and ultimately to recommend some maintenance and rehabilitation projects for the village engineers to use. So all of these objectives that I mentioned are part of a pavement management process. And when I talk about pavement management process, it's basically an iterative process, and it usually starts with setting some goals. The primary goal of a pavement management program is to determine funding requirements to meet agency goals. And we always start with setting some objectives, priorities, policies, and the budget level. And then as a next step, we need to have an understanding of the current pavement conditions. So that's why we did an objective, repeatable study to assess the pavement conditions, and we determined the pavement condition index, which is a measure of all the surface distresses, and IRI, or International Roughness Index, which is a measure of ride quality, or how bumpy the road is. And finally, we use that information to do some analysis and reporting. So we model pavement deterioration over time to predict what is the future pavement conditions, and to assess the timing and level of rehabilitation that is needed for each segment of the road, and the funding that is required for doing that type of work. So as I mentioned, to implement this pavement management program, we use a software called PAVER version 7. This software was developed back in 1970s by U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for DoD, and then later on has been vastly used by cities and counties all over the U.S. and all over the world, actually. And if I want to simplify PAVER, it has 2 major components. It's a database manager where you can manage your pavement inventory, you can store pavement condition data, you can keep track of the work history, the M&R work that you do, and also it has an analysis module where you can predict the future conditions, and you can determine the maintenance and rehabilitation need for each segment of the road and the costs associated with it. And basically, at the end, develop some maintenance and rehabilitation projects for the entire village with a given budget or with a given goal. And as a second step in the pavement management program implementation, as I mentioned, we need to have an understanding of current pavement conditions. And for that reason, we deployed the latest technology that is there. It's called Laser Crack Measurement System, LCMS. It's a 3D laser camera, and it allows us to capture 3D images of the road. And we can see the width and depth of all cracks on the surface of the road that we drive. And we process all of these images. We try to identify and classify all the cracks using image processing, AI, manual review, and at the end of it, we imported all distress types, severities, and quantities into paper program to determine a score of 0 to 100 for each block of the road. And then we can further divide up that 0 to 100 scale into different categories, failed pavements, serious pavements in serious condition, very poor pavements, all the way to good pavements, which are PCI of 85 to 100. And as you can expect, when we construct pavements, they start from a PCI of 100, they deteriorate over time, and finally they get to a point that they are basically unserviceable and they need to get reconstructed. But as you can see in this curve, this is just a representative. It's not like all pavements deteriorate this way, but usually when pavements are constructed, they deteriorate slowly in the first few years, and then they get to a point in their life when the slope of deterioration increases. And we call that critical PCI, and that's basically the critical point in the pavement life when pavements are suitable for mill and overlay projects. And if you don't catch the pavements in that critical point in life, then they'll rapidly deteriorate to a point that you need to basically do reconstruction on them. So when we do pavement management, we try to focus on some areas. First of all, we try to focus on pavements that are in good condition. And those that are PCI of 70 and above, 65 and above. And those pavements are in good condition with minimal distresses, and usually those are best candidates for preventive maintenance work. And if we do some inexpensive surface treatment activity, we would be able to seal the cracks, seal the surface so that we can slow down the rate of deterioration and basically stretch that pavement deterioration curve so that we can keep those good pavements in good condition for a longer time. And then the second area of focus are pavements that are in that critical PCI range. Those are candidates for mill and overlay projects. And as you can see, those are pavements that start deteriorating super fast, and we need to catch those pavements really fast, because if we don't, the cost of deferral is really high, because then they get to that reconstruction phase. And it's, pavements are similar to maintaining cars. We don't want the engine to fail. So we want to do those type of preventive maintenance work so that we can ultimately manage the network more cost effectively. All right, so just to give you some examples of pavement condition and what a certain PCI means, I have a few examples of the streets throughout the village. For example, this one is West Gold Avenue from Campbell Court to Douglas Terrace, and this one is a PCI of 99. It basically doesn't have any distresses. It's slightly weathered, which means, it doesn't have that shiny black-looking surface, but it has minimal longitudinal or transverse cracks, and in a few years, it would be a good candidate for crack sealing. The second example that I have is Garfield Avenue from West Scranton to Hancock, and this one has a PCI of 79. This one is in satisfactory condition, and it has minimal, some few linear cracks, longitudinal and transfer crack, and those are cracks that need to be sealed, and the village does a good job of doing crack sealing. As you can see, some of those cracks are already sealed, and anything that is not sealed needs to be crack sealed over time. And then after crack sealing, it's recommended to do a slurry seal to basically seal coat the whole surface of the pavement so that we can slow down that rate of crack propagation in the pavement. The next example that I have is a pavement, West Washington Avenue. It's a fair PCI, 55 to 70. This one has a PCI of 69. Again, we have some low and moderate longitudinal and transverse cracks. If you look at the edge of the pavement, we are seeing some edge cracking, and these pavements are suitable for crack sealing, patching, and then ultimately doing a thin overlay so that we can restore it to the service life. And the next example is Glen Avenue it's actually an intersection in Glen Avenue, and this segment has a PCI of 44. As you can see, it's showing some localized failures. We have some raveling present, some moderate longitudinal transverse cracking present, edge cracking present, and this would be a suitable segment for a Milan overlay. And then this is another example, Sunset Terrace. This one has a PCI of 27, and it's in very poor condition. Cracks have basically extended from curb to curb. We are seeing alligator cracking, edge cracking, and these are, a segment like this is a suitable candidate for a thick overlay with a lot of base repair, or basically a partial rehab or a surface reconstruction. So this one basically has already lost its window of opportunity for just a simple Milan overlay. This really needs extensive work. And then this one is in serious condition. We have high severity alligator cracking, which is a good sign of base failure. This is structurally deficient, so if you just go in and do a simple Milan overlay, it's not going to give you that 15 years, 20 years life expectancy that you want, because the base has failed, so you need to do heavy base repairs, partial reconstruction, so that you can bring this back to its service life. And then this one is basically a segment that has been left to turn to gravel, and it has a PCI of 9, it's failed, and it's full of potholes and cracks. It's Northern Avenue from Stafford Avenue to North End. So on this one, you cannot do anything other than a full reconstruction. So now that you have an idea of what different pavements in different conditions look like, this is how the entire network looks like. So you have around 31 center lines of roads, and the average PCI when we did the inspection was around 62. And from that average PCI, the graph shows how it's distributed between the different categories. You have about 26% of the pavements in that very poor category, which are candidates for thick overlay with base repairs and partial reconstructions. Fortunately, you don't have too many pavements in failed or serious condition, but those pavements in very poor condition, of course, will become serious and fail very soon. You have about 17% in poor condition. Those that are closer to that critical PCI. Those are candidates for moderate to thick Milan overlay. So those are still in their window of opportunity, and it's a really good idea to try to save those pavements before it's too late and they turn into a partial reconstruction project. And then you also have about 21% in satisfactory condition and 21% in good condition. Those are pavements that are ideal for preventive maintenance work. So if you do some crack sealing, localized patching, and slurry seal projects on those, you could be able to extend the life of those pavements and keep those good pavements in good condition for a longer time, so that you don't need to do costly Milan overlay projects on them. So that was the current conditions, and then we looked into different budgets and how they affect the long-term conditions. So we ran a do-nothing plan, and then we ran a plan to see what is the impact of your current level of funding, which is around $450,000 per year for pavement-related work. I know that you have about $600,000 in total, but there are some non-pavement works, such as ADA work, sidewalk work. So I set those aside. This is just the budget for pavements. And then we looked into other plans, one to see what is the required budget to keep the conditions at their current state, which at the start of the plan, which was May 2022, start of FY23, the PCI was 59 and the backlog was about 6.9 million. Backlog basically means all those works that you need to do in the city, and they're the backlog of the projects basically. So we ran a budget to see what is the required budget to maintain the current condition. to reach to the PCI of 65, reach to the PCI of 70, 75, and then finally, as an upper bound, what is the required budget to completely eliminate the backlog. And here are how these plans look like. As you can see, if you do nothing, in 5 years, the black line shows the do nothing plan. You have a PCI of 48 and the backlog will increase to 10 million. If you keep with your current budget of $450,000 per year, the PCI in 5 years would be 57 and the backlog would be around 7.3 million. If you, in order to keep the current conditions, PCI of 59, you need around $460,000 per year. So it's almost in the ballpark of the budget that you currently have, and the backlog will increase to 8 million. If you want to reach the PCI of 65, you would need around $750,000 per year, and that will lower the backlog to 5.9 million. And all the way, if you want to reach, if you want to completely eliminate the backlog, an annual budget of $1.74 million is required. And that's kind of the upper bound of what do I need in the city to eliminate all the backlog. And I don't recommend that you definitely need to utilize that budget, but just to give you an idea, the averages that we see in the US are around PCI of 60 to 65. So you are around that average, national average, slightly maybe lower than the national average, but and your current budget is enough to keep the steady state. So it's not allowing you to improve the conditions. So if you want to improve the conditions to a PCI of 65, of course, a higher annual budget is required. And here, I basically have another table just showing these different plans and the annual budget for each plan, and the total 5-year spending, the backlog at the end of the plan, and then I have added another column, which is the total cost, and that's basically the spending and the backlog all together. And with that number, I want to just suggest that if you consider backlog as a burden to the village, so, you know, at the end, even though it's a backlog, it's on you to take care of them at some point. So if you consider backlog as a burden to the budget, you'll see that with an eliminate backlog plan, even though the current spending is higher, but at the end, the total cost, considering backlog as part of that cost, is lower, like 8.7 million versus 10 million. And of course, you'll get to a higher PCI of 84, and at that point, you would be able to just do preventive maintenance work and avoid any costly mill and overlay or reconstruction projects altogether. So yeah, with that, I just want to leave you with some final recommendations. Implementing preventive maintenance preservation techniques such as crack sealing, slurry seal, and localized patching is very important. And Village is currently using crack sealing and patching, and it's recommended to also add a slurry seal to your toolbox as a preventive maintenance work, and apply that to those good pavements so that you can keep them in good condition for a longer time. And then, using paver program to prioritize existing funding to maximize the overall benefits. And of course, if you want to reach a higher PCI, you would need to increase the funding. And ultimately, this pavement management program is an iterative process. It needs to be kept up to date. So entering work history annually, doing this type of pavement condition surveys every 2 or 3 years to get a feeling of what the current conditions are and whether you're on the right track or whether you need to invest more or less is really important. And also within the pavement management program, there are a lot of inputs such as the rehab strategies that you use, unit rates, deterioration curves. So those all also need to get updated on a routine basis so that the recommendations from the program make sense and are in line with the reality, basically. So with that, I just want to acknowledge Village of Lake Bluff, CMAP for funding the project, and AECOM. Abbas is here from who provided project management for this project, and If you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you. Very impressive. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any questions on the board?
I did have a question. So if we were to, I mean, right now, we have the benefits of the CMAP-funded study, and it's great, but it's like anything, you know, when you gather all that data, it's a snapshot, and then time passes and things deteriorate and et cetera. So the input into updating that database, is that something that the village can do by purchasing the software, or do we hire an outside consultant? I mean, what might that look like if we want to do more than just say, oh, here are some takeaways, let's move with those takeaways? What are our options?
Great question. Yes, so we basically implemented payment management program, and as part of this study, CMAP is providing a license for paver program. And it's a very user-friendly software to use. And actually, tomorrow I have a training for for village staff, and it's really easy to keep it up to date. All you need to do is, whenever there's a work done, add that work history, and Paver will reset its PCI to 100, and then it will use the deterioration curves to deteriorate the models. And every now and then, you need to go back and update the inputs, but at least on a routine basis, from the village standpoint, entering work history is really important.
Mm-hmm. So that 3D modeling that was done by the specialized vehicle and all that equipment, you're recommending that might be done every 2 or 3 years, right?
Yes.
But, so that would be hiring that service, right?
Yes.
And so what might that look like in terms of cost and?
In terms of cost,
Do you want to come up to the mic so that it can be heard at home?
Thank you.
Thanks.
So just giving you ballpark numbers again, because for parts of the CMAP program, we were able to do so many communities, so it's, you know, cost of economics and everything that we get a pretty low cost. But in general, if you go, it's going to be around less than 50,000 for an agency of your size. It'll be anywhere between 20 to 50,000, I would say, to do a whole comprehensive survey. And then, you know, if you do coordinate with multiple agencies in and around the areas, you can definitely bring that cost down, which is what we've done for the CMAP program.
So again, that's the cost for the detailed survey.
Yeah.
And then the software that we would.
The software you're getting from the CMAP's providing you that software,
I
that
see.
doesn't expire.
I see.
So that's there it's gonna be there forever. Without expiration, you don't have to pay anything.
So the license is free?
Yeah, the license is free. You get 2 users being able to work, and Sadaf's gonna be here tomorrow, and day after, she's gonna be a 2-day training, which will be a comprehensive training.
Right.
And if at all you can, you know, you learn the analysis portion, you learn the inventory portion, everything to learn about the software we'll cover in the next 2 days.
And I thought that curve that showed, you know, the life, how it kind of deteriorates slowly and then it gets, the curve gets steeper. I wanted to know, that's kind of taking a bunch of data over a bunch of areas. It's not specific to Lake Bluff. That's kind of just like the general rule of paver life.
So that's a general plot, but in the paver program, you have the option to calibrate all these models, and that's one of the components of the work. And what we've done during this project was to go in and calibrate the models so that we have a good representation of how pavements actually deteriorate in Lake Bluff. So they are calibrated. But the more data, the more rounds of survey we do, the more work history information we have in the system, the better we can calibrate those models. So it only gets better, and it only can, yeah.
We have also Jeff Hansen, our village engineer, who wants to interject. Correct?
Yes, I would just say, obviously, Sadif has got a lot of expertise in this, in pavement, and we're very fortunate to have gotten this grant from CMAP to provide this service and have her expertise kind of put her eye on what we've done over the past several years and what we can do moving forward. I think, you know, if you look at the numbers of where our pavements are right now, the biggest one I think was in the serious condition, like 26%. Part of that, I think, is attributed to there was a change in the mix designs in 2006 to 2008, somewhere around there, and those just did not do well. So George Russell, when he was the village engineer, got off of that program pretty quickly, but those couple of years of perhaps, subpar materials have kind of set that back. We've talked internally about budgeting more in 2 years when we have, and Drew, I forget the name of the source of those funds. That's our Build Illinois money. Is that correct?
Yep.
To try to get rid of some of the backlog, and some of the other backlog is Green Bay Road, which we've talked about several times. We expect to be very competitive to get the grant in this next cycle, and that project is still a few years away, but that is also kind of weighing down our score to the serious condition in some of our roads. So we will have the training the next couple of days, and I think staff will just kind of assess what it's going to take to keep this program up. If nothing else, this is a wonderful snapshot in time of our road system, and the expertise they provided, it really helped, kind of calibrate what our eyes see. We've been doing visual assessments of our roads every year to try to figure out where we are and what, if our budget is working or not working. And just having this, the laser service and the expertise that they come in and give us this report that kind of guides us over the next few years, I think it's very beneficial. I'm very happy to have it.
Thank you very much. Any more comments?
I just want to say this is so helpful and it's wonderful. My one question about that graph is we're assuming that the surface is all asphalt. Is that an assumption? And as you did this study,
Yeah.
that's the case in Lake Bluff, is it not?
But in Lake Bluff, I think everything was asphalt except for one segment.
Okay,
Yeah, so, and when we go in and do the survey, the type of distresses are associated with the surface type. For example,
Right.
if it's a concrete, we look at corner breaks and faulting, and there are specific type of distresses that are associated with concrete surfaces.
Right.
And then with asphalt, we look into longitudinal and transverse crack, alligator cracking, and rotting, or different type of distresses that are associated with asphalt concrete. But in Lake Bluff, you don't need to worry about concrete pavements, because
so the assumption is that it's the same. I'm really excited about the possibility, or the use of this database management system, because I think that once that data is put in there, then you have the analysis that occurs, which will help us make these determinations for budgeting purposes.
Exactly. And at the end, data is gold. So now at least you have a pavement management program. It's a database. You can store data, and then
Right.
in a few years, go back and compare
Exactly.
different type of works, different rehab strategies, see what is actually working for you and your environment. So it only becomes more valuable over time, and the more data you put in, the more valuable it gets.
That's the last question I was going to ask. So is there a reporting function with the database so that they can generate
Yes.
those reports to have a look-back period for that?
Yes, so we have the paper software allows for different reporting options. One of them, you can generate plots like this.
Okay. That's great.
Very easily. You can generate
Like status reports, if
status
you
reports, but also
looking at
one
those
report
maps.
that shows, do you see that GIS map?
Right.
So everything, you can generate reports on GIS. You can click on a segment on GIS, and everything is geo-referenced. So it's really easy to navigate through, find a segment, look at its historical information, look
Right.
at its future conditions, predicted future conditions, and
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for
Very
this.
nice.
I had one
Please.
last question. I was wondering if you could clarify, when we talk about 6.9 million in backlog,
yes.
those backlog streets, when we were just looking at that bar graph, would that be the streets that are failed to pour, or what does that encapsulate? What is that?
Very good question. So it would be anything, failed all the way to poor,
Okay,
and those are your major backlog.
okay.
And then we also looked into a PCI category of 65 to 85
Okay,
segments that are showing only environmental related distresses, and those are backlogs for global work, global preventive work, which is slurry seal type of activity. So the total backlog, that 6.9 million backlog, considers both the preventive maintenance backlog and the major below critical, which is when we set the program, we set
Right.
the critical PCI at 55, and anything below critical PCI is considered a major MNR backlog.
thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Can you pull that one up?
Yeah.
Drew, I wanted to ask you a quick question.
Sure.
From a budget standpoint, do we have a reserve, or are we kind of bumping along in a budget of roughly $500,000 every year? Some sort of a surplus reserve?
For the road program, no, it's coming straight from the general fund.
Okay.
And other dollars that are MFT dollars. We kind of bounce between MFT and general fund like
Yeah.
every other year. And Jeff had mentioned that the dollars we're going to get from the state, some additional dollars that are really subject to the MFT, the motor fuel tax limitations, and that's that bump we're going to do in a couple years and catch up there. But no, there's no separate fund for this. It's all coming from general fund monies or MFT.
Thank you, Drew. And then Jeff, I don't know if you can see the slide that's up, but that green portion, it looks like the most efficient thing we can do to reduce costs over time is to maintain our 65 to 90 score by implementing seal cracking, et cetera. Do you know if that's something we're doing a good job of today, or is there an opportunity there?
We have been doing crack sealing. That was done in 2010 to 12. We just kind of restarted it, then we paused in the COVID year, and we're starting it again. We may, as a result of this study, I might try to, in the next budget meetings, push a little more of our overall budget into the crack sealing and steal a little from the general resurfacing, as crack sealing is relatively cheap. So we're getting better at that, but I think there's still room for improvement on that preventative maintenance. There's some other asphalt rejuvenation products that I've been looking at least trying. Other communities have been more into that. So newer technology, stuff that you can put down in year 1 or 2 of the street that's supposed to extend its life as well. And again, those treatments are very, I guess, relatively inexpensive compared to the full resurfacing that we do for streets every year.
Great, thank you. If I can understand your slide, just making a small improvement in our budget will actually make a big difference. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And please, if you had any other questions, please reach out, and I'd be more than happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next on our agenda is a discussion regarding the operation of non-highway vehicles, golf carts on local roads. Under Illinois law, a municipality may authorize the operation of non-highway vehicles, which include all-terrain vehicles, golf carts, off-highway motorcycles, and recreational off-highway vehicles on roadways under its jurisdiction if the unit of local government determines that the public safety will not be jeopardized. A municipality may restrict the type of non-highway vehicles that are authorized to be used on its streets, but before permitting the operation of non-highway vehicles on its roadways, the municipality must consider the volume, speed, and character of traffic on the roadway and determine whether non-highway vehicles may safely travel on or cross the roadway. The village board has discussed allowing golf carts on local roads as far back as 2008 and as recently as 2019. In 2008, village leadership was not inclined to authorize golf carts due to public safety concerns, mixing modes of transportation, and the barriers that state routes play, such as limitation on non-highway vehicles to perpendicular crossing of state routes. When the village re-examined the same topic late in 2019, the board chose to stop studying the issue due to concerns regarding public safety and a lack of support from the police department. At the request of Village President Charlot, a COW discussion is scheduled today, now, to consider the establishment of a golf cart pilot program. It is anticipated that resident Bob and Brenda O'Neill, along with resident John McAndry, will address the COW tonight, right now. Please.
I'll do it.
Thank you. Please state your name and your address. Thank you.
My name is Brenda O'Neill. My address is 700 Evanston Avenue. And I've been a resident of this community for almost 50 years. I have lived an active lifestyle here. I have biked around town, jogged the sidewalks and open lands, played tennis, played third baseman for McCormick softball team, competed in the annual Rib Fest, carried the banner for Lake Bluff Precision Lawnmowers, and I walked my dog. You really can't beat the ambience of our dog and kid village. As some might say, I'm approaching the fall season of my life. I've had both knees and both hips replaced and have other ailments that curtail the active lifestyle I once enjoyed. When I turned 74, my husband and I decided that we wanted to continue to enjoy the magnificence of our beautiful village, despite the limitations brought on by age. To that end, we bought a golf cart. Driving our golf cart around the village has been wonderful, and we are always greeted by smiling residents, children waving, and supportive neighbors. There are others like me, including friends of mine with similar limitations. They love it when I pick them up to tour the village. It gives us a sense of freedom and the ability to once more enjoy the sights and sounds of Lake Bluff. I have been stopped by our village police several times, always telling me I should not be driving a golf cart on village property for safety reasons. I support and respect our police, but disagree with their reasoning as the evidence does not support that there is any substantial safety issues of my golf cart. My golf cart is an electric vehicle that is street ready. It has front and back seat belts, had rear hazard and brake lights, turn signals, horn, and rear view mirrors. I welcome the members of this committee to examine my golf cart. Just give me a call. Also, while driving my golf cart, I respect the rules of the road. I come before this committee to ask that the Village of Lake Bluff allows street-ready golf carts on village streets as a pilot program so our seniors and other residents can enjoy the sights and sounds of our lovely village and experience the sense of freedom that we once enjoyed in our youth. Let's see how a pilot program would work. Thank you.
Thank you.
You can't hear them. I'll stay away from you, Susan. John McKendry, 600 East Center Avenue. Yes.
Thank you. So we are at 6:35 pretty
Okay.
much. So if we could have your comments and enough conversation to actually end up at 7 p.m., whereas we have
Okay,
our next
I'll
meeting
try and
starts.
speed through.
Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. So first, what a beautiful letter. Hopefully we can make her wish come true tonight. Good evening. Congratulations again to Regis and the new board members. I love seeing the new board members. I voted for you guys also. Not you, Steve, sorry. But everyone else. I'm not sure where everyone is at in regard to this opportunity, so let me give you a quick background. As mentioned earlier, 2 years ago, over 200 residents signed a petition for a golf cart pilot that we researched. I have a 40-page presentation. I'm not going to put you through that now, although I appreciate you putting it in the packet. And I know apparently also, Drew, I believe they were all sent that. So you have it. So if you have nothing to do, go ahead and read through that. But it is very good information. Let me start with a quick, what I'm going to do is boil it down and just give you the pros from that presentation. The presentation basically went through and took the strategic plan for the village and applied why a pilot program for the golf cart would work. And then, so I'm going to boil it down. So what are some of the pros of us doing a pilot? First, it fits, well, not necessarily first, but here's many. First, it fits the Lake Bluff vibe. It's eco-friendly. It decreases the carbon footprint, just like you do with DK organics. It increases home value. Realtor endorsed by the president of Baird and Warner, along with Griffith Grant and Lackey, specifically Brad Anderson, who the board just appointed to your pro-business committee. He's very pro-business and believes that golf carts they all believe that it will add value and why people want to come and move here. It frees up parking in the CBD. You can park 2 to 4 golf carts instead of 1 in the space. It increases business in the CBD with a captive audience for shopping and eating. It increases the business in the CBD with positive ROI raffle merchant opportunities. It increases business with a potential summer golf cart parade to have people come down and spend money and eat. It's a potential to generate sales revenue from cart sales and repair operations. It's great for disabled or those who have issues moving around and can't easily walk or ride a bike and don't want to drive an automobile. It's great for getting mail up and down the driveways, like Dave DeZaling, who also has one. It's a fun way to move around freely and openly, like a convertible. It allows you to carry chairs and picnic supplies, unlike a bike. It allows you to meet people in the community, unique and inviting, creating camaraderie. It's low maintenance, less expensive upkeep than a car or bike. It can quietly plow snow on a driveway, convenient carry-all for gardening, and many more. I can go on, and we'll learn these as we move forward with a pilot. So now let's address some of the questions Brenda has asked me. And what happened was, since I did it 2 years ago, Brenda and Bob said, hey, can you help me? I'm like, well, first, I don't want to go back again. It was painful the first time, but I will come back and help you. So now let's address some of the questions that Brenda asked me that I couldn't answer, but I believe basically Drew, since from an administrative standpoint, can answer them, and from a policy standpoint, the board can. So we, again, have over 200 folks in the community who signed a petition in support of a pilot program. We gave you 56 years of collective data from 9 nearby communities who have golf cart programs that have been operating safely in their communities for years. Yet, unlike the factual data we presented documenting golf carts to be safe and more, no factual data relevant to the proposed pilot regarding safety concerns has been presented. Just the opposite. Brenda asked me why the village contradicts their own safety concerns by allowing for numerous years, and as recently as 3 months ago, the usage of golf carts not even outfitted for street use during the 4th of July, the Criterion bike races, the Ghost Walk, when our town at the 4th of July has an influx of people and traffic up to 5 times our normal traffic patterns. So perhaps Drew, as the administrator, could you please answer that?
Yeah, I think when those are being operated, those are authorized vehicles to carry out a job or task for municipal support.
So the golf carts are? So they're unsafe if they're driving with all the equipment on here, but they're safe when you bring them without lights, without anything?
So like in the parade, in the bike
Right.
race, closed courses, so different scenario, right?
What
The
do you
streets are closed off for those events and they're within the range of that event.
Okay. When you say closed event, so they're not within the closed in the bike race, they sit outside of that on streets that are open and traffic is going up and down with them, right?
So.
And in the Ghost Walk, they're driving up and down town with all the other traffic, right?
Ghost Walk.
Yeah, the Ghost Walk. They use the golf cart in the Ghost Walk. Is that correct?
I don't remember. I don't know.
Okay.
But I
Well,
don't know,
let's
but I know
go
for the
back
bike
to the
race-
Criterion race.
Bike race for
Are they-
sure.
You're telling me they're on the bike path with the bikes?
No, and you know, the difference, I think the distinction is, you know, serving a function of supporting an event, a specific event for a one-time period for those specific public safety functions, or they're providing specific services, like there's other examples like where like Groot or other providers
Yeah,
of
we'll get to
services.
that. Mhm.
Yeah, and those are different from this one where the village can make a choice, a policy choice, as to authorize them on local streets. Different scenarios.
So let's continue, John, please.
Okay, so Drew, also though, golf carts, you know, if they represent such a safety concern, then why for years have they been permitted on East Lake Bluff streets for these events, right? And then I said, Drew, if golf carts represent such a safety concern, why are they safe enough to be driven down a state road through the most dangerous intersection, which is Rockland Road and Green Bay Road, and then down the bike path without any accidents when being borrowed from the golf course for years? Was that authorized? So they can be authorized to do unsafe things again, but we're being told that we're unsafe when we're totally outfitted?
It's a rhetorical question.
Pardon me?
It's a rhetorical.
Rhetorical question.
Well, okay, let me ask a different question. How do the golf carts get from the golf course to the different events?
I think they've taken the bike paths over time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And down the road, right? So they have to, if they're coming from the golf course, they go down a state route, right? Green Bay Road. We're south of Green Bay is the village. North of Green Bay is a state route.
No, and I think you made your point.
Okay,
But I
thank
think
you.
the idea is the board going to consider changing a policy to allow it on local streets? Right?
Okay. Well, and is there so there's a policy from the board already allowing golf carts to be used even if they're not equipped for special events?
John, we're considering a policy to use golf carts on roads, so don't put us on the spot.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay, all right. But I'm trying to give you ammo of why, from Brenda's asking me, I don't understand this. We have safety carts, yet they, it's like do as we say, not as we do, okay? So another need, more for the question, to your point, you brought it up, Drew. For more than 5 years in county, the village allows non-highway UTVs, which are illegal to drive in Illinois roadways by statute, to operate on the streets in Illinois roadways on a weekly basis. So Drew, you previously stated 2 years ago that cart drivers were trained, so it's okay. So can you please explain what the training entails?
You're asking me about the village's training, or you're asking about Groot's specific training program?
I'm asking you for the vehicles that Groot, the carts that Groot uses. What's the training? Because we could use the same training for the golf carts for the pilot.
John, I'm sorry to interrupt, because
Go ahead,
obviously you're very passionate about it, but I think your time may be best spent putting your argument forward as opposed to looking for a reaction and let us discuss.
Okay, all right, fine. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
So again, the idea is, and just so you know something else too, obviously I'm driving the point home that we have residents, 200 residents, who are interested in trying a pilot to see whether this, in fact, the fear that this is not going to be safe, just to find out whether it's going to be true or not. We can monitor just like the other, pilots that are done. And what's confusing for, Brenda, myself, and others is how is it that, we can't do it with street legal carts, yet the village does it. And then in addition to that, the Groot carts are out there. And just so you know, which is important for the board to know again, the Groot carts, I hope the training includes hand signal turns. They don't even have turn signals. And they're driving around the roads. But the good news is, we haven't had a single accident. Not a single accident. So for the record, again, we are open to the same training for the pilot in East Lake Bluff if that's what it takes. Our golf carts have turn signals, and we are legal to be on the road, and we can share the signage. Let's move on to some of the information in your packet. I'll try and be quick. How am I doing on the time check?
8:42.
All right.
6:42.
All right, how much time? So I don't have much time. So in the packet you were provided, 3 years of crashes involve Lake Bluff. Even though they predominantly represent streets the pilot would not even be driving on, like high accident-prone intersection Green Bay Rockland Road. Document also includes all these crashes only involving Lake Bluff residents. I find that hard to believe. 6% is amazing. We have 6 drivers in our household, and nobody's had an accident, thank God, in the last 3 years in Lake Bluff. Interesting point again, none of those crashes involved or were the cause of non-highway vehicles, even though they operated in Lake Bluff for those 3 years and even longer. So the data relevant to the proposed pilot regarding safety concerns actually is just the opposite. In your packet, you'll see a hex max covering a 4-year period from SR 1050 reports from the CBD areas. If you look at the legends, these are incidents, not crashes. So again, we don't believe that there's issues and still no data relevant to the proposed regarding safety concerns. In your packet, you also see a graphic crash dummy photos. Only thing is the golf carts in this pilot can't go 31 miles an hour, so it's irrelevant. In addition to that, the picture right here, it's not even a golf cart that would be used in the pilot. It's an LSV 2x2, so it's not appropriate again. So still, again, no applicable data. Oops, where'd I go? In your packet, you'll see, let's see, okay, so again, in your packet, you'll also see select news stories. But again, when you read the article, you'll see the drivers are teenagers. And again, our pilot is for 21 years and older. That's written that you are all looking at. Even if the documents provided were relevant, then why would the village contradict their own safety concerns, allowing numerous years of golf carts? So I'll stop here. In closing, the pilot program has way many benefits. And I think we've already demonstrated the village has in regards to the special events with golf carts, and these golf carts are going to be more protected. And the fact that you've allowed the Groot carts, which again don't even have turn signals, and they're driving around all of our streets 2 to 4 times a week, and we haven't had any issues. That I believe that the best way to solve this is to move forward and have a pilot in East Lake Bluff, which represents over 50 of the households, learn as we go along, monitor it, control it, give specific rules so that we make sure that we don't do anything. I think, again, Brenda said, I obey the law, I respect the police, you know what I mean? That's what you're gonna get out of the people that are gonna be participating in this. So with that, I'll yield. If you have any other questions, I apologize for getting hot on it, but Steve, you're right. I'm passionate because to me, it's, I just don't feel that we're looking at it in totality.
Thank you, John.
All right, thank you.
So we have Chief Ovskin online also to answer any questions the board might have, okay? My intent is to come to a consensus, pro or against, but basically that we arrive to consensus, and the outcome of that consensus would be that we either drop a subject or we direct the staff to write a policy on this subject.
I'm sorry, can I just clarify one thing? You're looking for consensus on a specific pilot, or are we interested in this and then we would have a pilot proposed to us? Because it would be hard, we don't know all the details of the pilot at this point, even though it was in the document. I think it would be good to get a sense and be iterative, and the next time we could.
We either proceed toward the pilot and defining that pilot, or we drop this idea totally. And that is the consensus I would like to establish on this board.
I have a question.
Okay.
So my understanding is the pilot program, and I don't, John, if you want to answer my question, or Brenda, my understanding is the pilot program is specific to the east side, and as of right now, we don't have any interested participants in, let's say, North Terrace or East Terrace, the terraces. But how would we address an equal opportunity for community members who, how would we move forward with the pilot program if community members on the other side would want to participate? I kind of am trying to get ahead of conflict that might divide the community over the East Siders get to drive around and can drive from their house to town, but the West Siders can't.
Great question. So first of all, in my packet, 40 presentation, we had a committee, representative individuals from residents from each one of the different areas. And so they would work along with and off of what we learned from the East Lake Bluff, but to also be honest, the sanctuary, which obviously doesn't get water from the village, doesn't get fire support from the village, there's some things that are prohibited. So because of the state routes, folks in the sanctuary just would not be able to have golf carts. Now, if the board felt
do you mind?
I apologize. I'm not going to repeat myself again. I think everybody heard that. But if you wanted to, the board felt compelled, easy enough, send a truck over there, a flatbed, put on an established time on a Friday if people wanted to come downtown on the weekends, load up the trucks, bring them over, drop them off, and let people use them. If you want to talk about, and again, in the packet, it will show you, you get 53% with the Lake Bluff with the east side. I think then it moves up. There's a way of having, what we do is, you could have Tangley Oaks, and again, these are just philosophically, they'd have to be worked through, right? But if there's a will, there is a way. You could bring Tangley Oaks, and then I always have a problem,
John,
I apologize for the terraces, right?
We are going to limit the pilot to,
Okay.
10 carts. We are going to try to get a geographic limit to,
Yes.
to the
Start
east.
with that and learn.
We're going to start, I want to speak as an engineer here, an agile engineer. So we'll start with a small experiment.
Yes.
If we have that experiment to be also, if we have candidates on North Terrace, East Terrace, we'll have similar geographical boundaries, not including state routes and all that, and we'll see how that goes. We have issues that were not worked out, such as connecting those different areas. It's an acceptable detriment to the thing. We are trying a thing. We're not establishing a full project where everybody can go anywhere.
Exactly.
As far as connectivity goes, it is not possible to get from the west side of town on the North Terrace to the central business district without using a sidewalk. There is no bike path access. unless you cross a state road. So the North Terrace would not be possible to do this. There's no, you can't cross, I mean, the Illinois law is clear. You would be crossing in a pedestrian crosswalk. I live on the North Terrace. I walk uptown every day on a sidewalk. It's not possible. I'm not going to get a flatbed to bring my golf cart. The whole point would be taking the golf cart to get to the place I want to go in lieu of walking, riding my bike, or driving a car. So it's prohibitive to the North Terrace as well as Tangley Oaks. We've talked about connectivity before in other conversations. But that's not my objection. My objection is just a pure safety. I've done a lot of independent research that was not included in the packet, and I appreciate the depth with which you dove into this. You didn't leave a lot of stones unturned, but there are a few. And there is data that can be extrapolated from a study done, a retrospective study done of 11 years of ER data from the state of Pennsylvania. And it identifies primarily children who are injured with head trauma. And my personal feeling is, as I spoke to safety at the last meeting, I am not in a position to be willing to experiment at all. And I don't think anybody else is either. But the statistics are available out there if you spend the time to look for them. And as far as, I just want to say one thing. I understand the arguments about the criterium and the 4th of July, but there are a lot of instances in which certain people are allowed to do certain things that the general public is not. And the OSHA statistics with golf carts aren't that great either. So even with training, the safety statistics are not great. We don't need to have a lot of instances of head trauma to anybody in order for it to not be a good idea. So the numbers of incidents are not as cogent as the incidents, period. And I appreciate the fact that you all might take this very seriously, but I have concerns about, because they're always cream of the crop, and then there's everybody else. And we have to think that way. We must. And I personally just am a safety-first person. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
Joy?
I appreciate all the time and research that you guys have done on this. I was here in 2019 along with Barbara and Regis in the last go-around on this. I don't really see that too much has changed except for maybe the folks sitting on the board. My understanding, and Chief Hoskin I know is on the line, but my understanding is that the police department doesn't support this pilot program, that they're concerned about safety. I think as most of us on the board are concerned about safety. I did a quick search today online of golf cart accidents 2021. That's all I searched. And most of the things that came up did not involve cars and golf carts colliding. It was people making a U-turn, the cart flipping, someone being ejected, someone being flipped out of the cart landing on someone. And most of them ended up in severe trauma or death. And just as an aside, last summer, my sister went to an island in South Carolina. It was all golf carts on the island, and while they were there, a little girl fell off the back of a golf cart and died. So I think to say that the safety of this is, we're kind of blowing that out of proportion, I don't agree with that. I think there is a true safety issue with having golf carts on the road. I feel like golf carts have a sense of informality, especially even this picture that in the presentation of, it looks like David Deslin with his grandchildren. His grandchildren are sitting in his lap while he's in the driver's seat. I think that there's kind of this thought process with golf carts that like, hey, get on the golf cart. And that concerns me, especially when you're talking about having them up by the beach or just in general, the way that they will be utilized in the village. And again, I'm sure some people would be very responsible, but I think a lot of people would kind of have that informal feel with them. I had a whole laundry list of things. I'm interested to know the communities that use golf carts. I actually called Highwood today because they came up on a list somewhere. And the person I talked to said, no, absolutely not. We don't have golf carts on the streets here. So I'm not sure that all of that information is 100% correct. But the bottom line for me comes down to, I just think it's a safety issue. I can't stress that enough. I feel like the police department is not on board with the pilot program. And I too have concerns. I don't think I've ever seen us legislate for a portion of the village rather than the whole village. And so that weighs on my mind as well.
Thank you, Joy.
Can I ask a question about the rationale behind only having East Lake Bluff in the pilot? Is that by request of the police in order to be more controlled? I understand what Kate is saying. You can't get all the way downtown. You could get to the parking lot on the Montessori side of the train tracks, but that doesn't get you downtown. So I understand that it's not as attractive for people on the other side of the train tracks. But if we were to do this, is there a reason why we couldn't allow it within the same requirements in the other neighborhoods?
The idea is it's a pilot. We want to test that, how this goes. As such, we can limit the area these vehicles can go. And if, let's say, we go all the way to having a successful pilot and people are putting seatbelt and not having a funny behavior with those, then we would consider seriously how can we link the 3 or 4 areas in town. So it's not a primary concern today. It would become a concern tomorrow or in 2 years or whenever it is, if we go ahead with that program.
It almost seems to me that a pilot would make more sense unless there's a safety concern in a broader swath, because what happens in East or doesn't happen in the East may or may not be relevant to what happens West. You can't take the data from whatever happens in the East and transpose it to assuming that same data holds. That being said, there might be logic here that I don't see, but that's one of the things that sort of I don't like about the pilot is that it sits only in the East, but.
So I'm actually really interested in the concept of how this pilot program would positively impact sustainability in the village. John, I appreciated that aspect, which I had never thought about. The golf carts are battery operated or charged. I think what I'd like to, I love that. I really love that, and I'm looking for more ways that community members can make their small indent or, reduce their footprint, their carbon footprint. What I would like to see us talk about right now is not the specifics of whether, of the pilot as in just in the East, because that does not sit right with me either. I'm not sure how we even present that without getting backlash of, and to your point, Susan, it would be, we would need a completely separate pilot then to figure out how it would impact the other neighborhoods. But whether or not we're going to further explore developing a pilot. So for instance, what I find interesting is a pilot for, focused on accommodating transportation for people with specific needs,
Yes.
as Brenda has presented. That actually really speaks to me, and I hate to see a whole population of people who would benefit from and be more mobile in the community, but for us not exploring this option. And I'm also not ignoring the clear concerns that Kate and Joy have both voiced, particularly because I have young children running around the neighborhood and would hate, I would not want to be part of something that brought more danger to the streets. But that's why I'm not comfortable with us just taking, say we're going with the pilot right now, but I am comfortable with further exploration and development, and let's see what's presented to us. That's what I would say.
Thank you.
I think Barbara.
I've been trying to not say anything until everybody else has had an opportunity, because I was part of that last effort to, talk about golf carts, and I didn't want to color what anybody else thought. I'm glad that everybody who's new to the board has an opportunity to approach this. But there are so many things that I can't even begin to, I've just got a few points. I want to bring up things that I think are new to the conversation. One being that the residents who involve themselves in this pilot are going to be investing thousands and thousands of dollars on their cart, and then we're going to say, we're going to pull the plug in 12 months or 36 months or whatever. I don't know about you, but I can sense a little bit of unhappy people if that happens. Two, it was talked at great length about the potential to have positive impact on the environment, but I can tell you that people are going to use carts instead of walking, which is a negative impact. How many residents are going to add a golf cart and eliminate a car? Probably none. Where are they going to park this cart? Who's going to have to look at it? Because who has an extra space in their garage ready for a golf cart? Maybe there are some, but probably not all. Another point I wanted to say is that we've got a big, beautiful rolling green, our village green. It's the centerpiece of our village. And what is a golf cart made to do? Roll all over big, wide green spaces just like that. And so we're going to take two things that are counterintuitive. No, you can't take your golf cart and put it on a green. And yes, you can take a golf cart and put it on a street where anybody coming from outside the village would not expect it. So that's just counterintuitive. The issues about mobility, my dad was in a wheelchair the last 3 years of his life. My mother presently uses a walker or is in a wheelchair if we take her out. And I parked at the train station and I take her in the wheelchair. And I know a lot of challenges that people face, and there's ways to get around it. And you do have to modify your life based on those things. And I know we're running to the end, and I'm very, very close. So if anybody really wants to view the meeting from 2 years ago, there's more things that were talked about. There's more, more information. Other people who sat in our seats had wise things to say. And so I would also say, no, I'm not going to say that. I'm gonna leave it there, that there are lots of issues, including the idea that this golf cart is gonna be lovely in the village. In the video that was referenced 2 years ago, I clicked on it, that was part of the packet, and the first thing I saw was a mom getting in her cart. She rips it into reverse, and this is what you hear. Boop, 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 boop. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm on my back patio. My neighbor next door is backing out of their drive every morning while I'm trying to sit and enjoy my coffee. I'm sitting on the village green, and there's somebody, boop, boop, boop. I don't want to add that noise pollution. It's a real thing. It's a real thing. So I think we can do a lot of exploring, but there's so many negatives that what problem are we solving? When the village has people picking up garbage, when the people who are attending to criterion potential, accident victims, all these things, these are village problems that are being solved through golf carts. It's not the only way that it could be solved, but that's one of the ways, and that's how the village is choosing to solve those problems. What problem are we solving here? I feel like we're creating problems.
Thank you.
I had one last thing I just wanted to add, and that was in 2019, Jean Sophie, who was the then superintendent of the schools, was not in favor of this pilot program. She did not think it was a good idea to have parents dropping their kids off at school in golf carts, and she felt like that congestion combined with cars was not a good idea. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Now, Dr. Leali might have a different perspective, I don't know, but that was the case 2 years ago.
Thank you. Steve or Suzanne? Steve?
Sorry. No, all good. And Barbara, that noise was like a crying baby to me. So it is, I don't think at this point making a decision of a yes/no decision is really realistic. You've got to put the equitability piece to the side. You've got to put really what is the pilot
to the side, but it's more of a, do we want to explore this more or not? And I know that, you know, Chief Hoskins' job, Drew's job, you know, all of our jobs is to keep this community safe, right? That's, you know, particularly Chief Hoskins, is to keep us safe. But what we have to do as a board also is look at the culture of our village, the overall health of our village, the marketability of our village, the vibe of our village. And I think it talks about a village, you know, culture in our essence, or in our strategic plan, village life. And to me, this is intriguing enough that I think it's something that we ought to look at. I see mopeds running around town all over the place, and I can't believe with helmets or not that those are safer than golf carts are. You know, so I'll keep it short, but my sense is that this is something that should be looked at, and I'm you know, if we could find a way to do a successful pilot and to make it equitable, I'm for this. Yeah.
Thank you, Steve. Suzanne?
I would add that I think I'm in the same place Steve is, but I am also considering the need for preferencing people with mobility concerns somehow, making this about mobility. That being said, I have a question. If somebody has a scooter, like a one-person scooter, you know, they can go on the sidewalk, is that right? But they can't go on the streets? That's
You
like
mean a moped?
No, I mean you know, like a what do you call it?
Little rascal? Like a chair, yeah, rascal.
Like a rascal, yeah, like, you know, like some, do you know what it means?
I mean, I know this is a chair with wheels and an engine.
Chair with
and you can
wheels
go-
that has a little basket in the front, and it's.
Yes, in fact, they wouldn't be able to go on the street because they can't reach the miles per hour that are
Required
required to be on
They
the
go,
street.
but they go on the sidewalk,
They do.
and then they can go on the sidewalk. I guess there would be, okay. Okay, that's,
Or on the street, to the side, I guess. I think my final comment was about cyclists. We've become a cycling mecca. And there was something in this packet that was presented to us about allowing them on bike paths. So, I'm sure that the elite cyclists that come here and choose to use our bike paths would not appreciate that at all. I know I wouldn't. So I think that was something else. Sorry, Susan.
no, one other thing that I wanted to say is I do think there's a significant difference between a vehicle that is accomplishing a community task. Maybe they ought to have lights on them. Maybe they ought to have turn signals. But I think that is serving a community need in a way, using them for the parade, using them in those limited instances, and we have control over the people who are authorized or asked to run those for us. And so I do think that that's a difference that should not trip us up particularly, though it's interesting that they haven't had any accidents that we know of. What is more compelling to me is the moped example that can't possibly be safer than a golf cart. So the biggest concern I have is being able to make sure that people who really need them would have access to them. And further, that we have some way of not limiting this to the east. I just think that that's bad policy. Even though I understand why it might make sense.
Illinois law would preclude us from allowing it on the west side of town. You can't cross a state highway.
I'm not suggesting that anybody be allowed to cross, Kate. I'm saying within their community without crossing, so I'm not suggesting that they be allowed to cross.
I just don't know where that gets.
So,
It doesn't get them to town, but it gets them around their community if they enjoy that.
So the pilot is specifically to be within their community and not to be village-wide for the time being, if we consider such a program, okay? It is the term of a pilot. Yes, Barb?
At this point in time, I just also would like the board members to consider how much we have invested in looking at this in the past and how much we want to dedicate our staff time to looking at this non-problem solving proposition. I think we have agenda item after agenda item of things that help the village run more efficiently, that help to make our streets safer, help, you know, all these things. And it's like, I'm just really frustrated that now we're going to be directing staff to continue to look at something that's a nice to have for some people. It doesn't solve a problem.
So, thank you. So what we have in front of us is the question that is, should we continue to explore this program for our residents? What I've heard is serious safety issues, people being hurt, people being more than hurt, people going to people dying, literally. And what I've heard also is people at those devices assisting people's mobility. So to your point, I think that actually there is a role for such non-highway vehicle in the community.
I'm sorry.
I totally disagree with that. Yes, some people will have fun using it who might not be able to ride a bike, but it doesn't solve a problem. I know because I have parents who are in wheelchairs and, okay.
I just have a quick question. It's for Brenda. Are you, at this point, are you unable to drive a car? I know you have problems walking or biking, but you can drive a car, correct?
Of course I can.
Okay. So you still have mobility in your vehicle, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I have mobility, and I think the best part about having a golf cart for us is because we can't ride a bike anymore. We can't do that. But when you are in a golf cart, you can go around the village, go past the lake, and enjoy. We're not speeding. We can stop just like that. And our golf cart is street ready. We have all the things that are parlance on it for safety. I have so many friends that they cannot ride a bike. I pick them up and it's just the freedom of being able to go around Lake Bluff again, like I used to.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you. So can I please ask also for public comment beside our comments? Are there anybody online willing to comment on the subject?
There's 3 attendees, but no one is raising their hand to make any public comments at this time on the golf cart conversation, but give them another moment. Oh, somebody actually physically in the room. There we go.
I wasn't familiar that this was going to be discussed tonight. Obviously, I came for my reason earlier. But nowhere in this discussion has anyone discussed liability. I'm thinking the group clearly covers their employees, the work that the EMS people do, which is, my son is one of those as a volunteer. They have their own very strict liability. And so I don't understand how the discussion could be had on the basis of a taxpayer who's going to end up, if this is a sanctioned policy. I'm not, it's nothing that I'm, but I'm surprised that hasn't been part by either the village attorney or someone on the board to at least discuss how that plays in.
That's an excellent point.
It was covered in 2019. Excellent question, thank you. By law, you have to have liability the same as the car in your golf cart, and you get that. And by law, Ruth, you and I went through this. We went to Irma and so forth. There's no liability upon, if the village decides they want to move forward with the pilot, no liability is extended to the village. It's up to the individual person who's got that golf cart, and they have to carry liability insurance. Just like
Are these vehicles, I heard the point of how they're set up.
Yeah.
Are these street?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's actually in the packet from a liability standpoint. The village is not liable.
Car restrictions
No,
like
we are-
motorcycle?
Yes. Insurance, driver's license over 21. It is actually in the packet for tonight.
Regis, can I just make a quick point? This
To
is,
complete this conversation.
I'm,
okay?
I think I'm going to wrap it up on the point that Mrs. Bjork just made. This reminds me a lot of the conversation we had with short-term rentals. This, and I am agreeing with Trustee Ankerman, this is going to put, if we do a pilot, just for those people who are interested in exploring this, put a tremendous burden on staff. We are going to have to check liability insurance. We are going to have to check licensure. We are going to have to check road readiness. We are going to put a burden on our police to check all this. They already are overburdened with other things. A pilot program is not just giving these friends and neighbors a green light to do this. It is adding a burden to staff's already unbelievable heavy burden.
Thank you, Kate.
I think that's something we have to think about. I agree with Barbara.
Thank you, Kate. I think we need to move on to the next meeting. I would like to put out as a decision if we should further explore this subject. Okay? And if we say yes, if we vote yes, it will be asking the staff to proceed. If we say no, we drop this subject.
Can I ask a question regarding that?
Yes.
What does that include? Drafting regulations, researching what? I'm sensitive to the issues that, that Kate and Barbara and others have raised.
Creating the parameters for such a pilot.
Yeah, we put together a draft working with staff already, based on parameters that it's very narrow.
So what do we estimate the amount of time required to do this? To put it forward, put additional information forward?
We didn't go as far as to determine the number of hours of staff required, but the program was designed in such a way that I think the limit, there's actual cap on the number of licenses that would be issued to 10, so that any inspection by staff wouldn't be a huge burden. It was laid out to be very, very contained. But that was also considering it was going to be done only in one geographic region of the village on the east side, and so.
I wouldn't support that.
Yeah, so.
As a pilot.
As a pilot.
I wouldn't even support it as a pilot.
I wanted to also state this liability. I did read in your packet how you had contacted Irma, et cetera, and there was no impact. But personally, I do take liability for the decisions of the board, and that's why I'm so passionate about trying to lay out the lack of logic and the lack of problem solving that this particular issue brings up. And it just seems like it's really frustrating to spend so much time on this when it doesn't serve a purpose that the village is mandated to do.
Thank you, Bob.
Can we please hear from Chief Hosking? Is he on the line? I'd really like his opinion.
He's here. I just asked him to unmute.
Can I just make a comment? I don't think as a...
Oh, wait, let's get Chibowski to talk.
Mike, we can't hear you. There we go. Thanks, Eric. It might be the computer, Eric.
I'm here along with Eric Gerke and Deputy Chief Smazinski.
Chief, I guess I was just wondering your opinion on the pilot program. I know we talked about it in 2019, but maybe you and the others there could just weigh in on your thoughts.
Well, we have really looked at this in depth, you know, and I'd like to say I could support it, but I just can't. I just think putting cars in competition, and that's what it would be with golf carts. And I think there's enough other vehicles out on the roads now that there's going to be somebody's going to lose, and golf carts aren't designed, quite frankly, to be on the roads. They're designed to be on a golf course. But I'm sorry, I just couldn't support the idea. Obviously, if you approve it and pass it, we'll enforce it, we'll follow the guidelines, but this is just not a program I think it's going to be a win for the community.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. So at this point, I would like to take a straw poll where we stand as a group. Are we going forward, or are we following the advice of Chief Hosking, for example? Or are we thinking there is a possibility? I would like to know where we're going.
I would like to not explore this issue further due to all the reasons that were myriad of reasons.
I concur.
Kate?
I agree with Trustee Ankerman.
Thank you, Kate. Darren?
I'm truly torn because I do see a benefit, but I can't ignore the words that just came from our trusted chief's mouth. So, you know, I also feel like this is a time crunch. So, but as it stands right now, I'm not comfortable with the division and not understanding how it would be an equitable policy for other community members.
Thank you. Joy?
I would say, I would not like to move forward with this. I agree with the chief.
Thank you. Steve?
Yeah, I'm for pursuing this further. I don't think that our job as trustees is just to solve problems in the community. I think there's something also that enhances the quality of life of our community, and I think this is something that I would be open to exploring further.
Thank you. Susan?
Yeah, I'm torn as well. I think it would be worth exploring. I do agree, however, that there are many more pressing matters, and so I wouldn't make this a priority that makes, I wouldn't make this a priority. I would get to it when we can get to it, but I don't want to dismiss it out of hand. I think there's lots of dangerous things that go on in the street, and that this would not be markedly different than those. But that being said, I respect everybody who's thought about this a lot more than I have. I don't know that this is the time to do it because of so much else that we have going on, but I also would not shut it down completely.
Thank you. So what I hear is, from a board standpoint, there's no consensus. This is not the time for it, and I will abide to this decision. Thank you very much.
So I'm sorry, what did we decide? There's no consensus and
we're not going forward.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you very much. And like I opened, I said congratulations, and it's hard sitting on the board, and I appreciate all of you listening, and you bring up valid concerns. And again, thank you for doing your job. This is awesome. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for stepping forward.
Thank you.
Might I get a motion to adjourn this committee of the whole meeting, please?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. We're adjourned.